So the scouting series continues here with Adam Tynan from the AVFC London Lions. We've picked a right centre back from the Eredivisie. We went to Feyenoord and we picked Luthriel Gertruida, very impressive young player. And then also we returned to Feyenoord for a CDM as well, didn't we? Mats Weifer. So I don't think Feyenoord would be too delighted with our scouting department, constantly raiding all of their players. But today, we're aiming for the number 10 position. Who knows? Maybe there might be another Dutchman turning up. Who knows? But no, Adam, look, why have you aimed for a number 10? Why is it an area you think Villa could do with a little bit of improving this summer? And who have you selected?
Thanks, Frankie. Yeah, I promise as a bit of an olive branch to the Eredivisie that I won't even talk about a single player from that league in this position, even though I'm sure there's plenty of talented tens in there. I think the reason I'm calling it loosely a 10 because I think very few teams, us included, really play with an out and out 10. Diaby sometimes does that supporting striker type thing. But I think you want somebody who, again, like Zaniolo, a little bit hybridy as well. A sort of can come off the left as a 10, can come off the right as a 10, can come properly centrally and play that role. But it's somebody who's a playmaker, really, somebody to unlock defenses. I think we have done for a long time, really, but when we seem to come unstuck is when people sit in deep and we just cannot unlock those teams. And we have lost a good chunk of that, I would say, in Douglas Luiz. We're probably kind of covered to a certain extent with Tielemans, Barkley, in doing the sort of slightly deeper playmaker role. But that last bit, the creative pass, the beating a player, the pass into the final third, I think that's potentially where we could do with somebody. So statistically, I was looking at shot creating actions, goal creating actions, passes into the box, or even beating a player in the final third, passes received in the final third, that sort of thing. I also sort of base it a little bit on what we're linked with. So we were historically linked with Pedro Gonçalves from Sporting Lisbon, Nico Williams, probably more of a wide 10 winger than an out and out 10, but somebody that drives with the ball and beats players. And then more recently, it seemed like we were quite keen on another Juventus player at Frosinone, Sule, who I would say is in that ilk as well, although was kind of seemed like they wanted a little bit more than we were willing to pay for him. And then last but not least, and the one we seem to be most heavily linked with, and again, I'm not going to talk about him because we're trying to avoid that sort of player, is Alex Baena. It does seem that we're in the market for somebody with probably the more beta player, pasta player in that final third type mold. We've got Bailey doing it off the wide. Diaby bits and pieces. Could Buendia come back? That's sort of what he does to a certain extent, but obviously a very long time out. But yeah, I think that's definitely somewhere we could strengthen this summer.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting in that number 10 role. I do think Moussa Diaby does play as that second striker quite a lot. But something I noticed last season, I went to the Wolves game where we won 1-0, and I was sat right at the top of the Trinity Road, and I just kept an eye on Diaby. And what I noticed was happening that he was constantly followed around everywhere he went by a big, tall centre back. And it felt to me like Diaby started the season on fire, and he slightly faded off a little bit and then came back. But I think that was all. That's firstly first season in a new league, much more a very physical league, a new role. He doesn't really ever play as a second striker. He traditionally has been a right midfielder. So it was a big transitional year for him, and he actually produced decent-ish numbers. Actually, and given the money we paid for him, you probably want a little bit more. But it's probably this season when you're kind of hoping for him to produce a bit more than what he did last season. And but what was happening is he's a very slight and diminutive guy, and he was just getting followed by the big man everywhere. And I sort of thought, I bet this is happening to him a lot. And it was. I watched games after and I was like, yep, this big defenders just follow this guy. And but it also drags players out of position as well and that kind of thing. But with the RB, he has a certain type of profile. But have you picked a different type of profile for the number 10?
Yeah, I would say so. So I've got sort of two names, and we can decide between us which one we actually put forward to the board. But yeah, I'd say Diaby's a funny one, isn't he? He's I'd say when I'm talking about the statistics, I was just talking about sort of shot creating actions that you wouldn't call him a cute passer per
No,
se.
he's not. No.
And I think that's probably, but Buendia potentially at his best was that sort of Buendia Pookie link up was all about sort of picking it up on the half turn and quite quickly moving it on with a really lovely ball. I've gone for two here because I think there's potentially, I would say, if you were linked with a Nico Williams, that's a very different profile to being linked with an Alex Baena, I would suggest. So I think if Nico Williams is the role that we feel needs fulfilling, I've gone for Rayan Cherki at Lyon.
Yep.
20 years old, but feels like he's been around forever. I think he's
Yeah.
been described as sort of the best thing out of Lyon's academy ever for what feels like 6 years now. Never quite made the next jump. Linked with Paris Saint-Germain a bit this summer, but equally the latest seems to be linked with West Ham, which shows you the spread bet of this guy's potential. And I think that's why he is seen as a bit of a risk, I suppose. I think if I had to compare him to somebody of old, I would say Hatem Ben Arfa, which probably, depending on what the first memory to your head is, either thrills you or terrifies you, because
Yeah.
that was a man with so much ability, but never quite harnessed it. And I think there is a risk that Cherki is that as well. But consistently year on year for the past few years for Lyon has been putting up numbers, and that's essentially what I'm looking at, the old stats. He loves to beat a player. He's trying to take on a player over 7 times per match, with a pretty bloody high success rate compared to all the other players I looked at as well. Comparing him to Gonçalves, Williams, Soulé, Baena, and some of the other guys I looked at, he had a 60% roughly success rate, and his shot creating actions per 90 is 5.6, which for comparison is the same as Cole Palmer in the season just gone. Shot creating actions is the stat that got me into stats, and it is because the player that got me into stats was Jack Grealish. I call shot creating actions the Grealish stat because for the sort of 18 months that he was at the peak of his powers, he blew away all of Europe on the shot creating actions metric. Just super exciting to watch. And I think these sorts of players are exactly that when they're on form. Somebody who terrifies defenders, commits them to challenges, but is also capable of really cute passing as well. So yeah, he's my one option for you. You would say downsides for him would be defensive contributions, so not going to charge back and help you out. And then the other one, which is probably hinted at a little bit, is personality. Whether he is some that, although I think I said exactly the same thing this time last year about Jeremy Doku, that people hadn't taken a risk on him because the whispers were personality type. And probably the place you want to go and the person you want to work for, if you've got that, is Pep Guardiola, because I don't think he suffers fools gladly. So maybe that's worked out to be the right move for him. But my second choice is more in the Alex Baena mold, much more of a passer than a dribbler, I would say. And that is El Khannouss from Genk. This is a lot more, dare I say, rogue, a little bit more under the radar, but he's been called the future of the Atlas Lions. So Morocco's future star. One of those players who just so exciting to watch, like wonderful balance, can play off both feet, which makes him really, really difficult to deal with, right? Ball striking off both feet seems to be more or less the same. Hard to say what sort of footed he is. He's creating even more shots per 90 than either Cherki or Palmer at 6.1. He's playing over 4 key passes on top of that per 90. And his progressive distance passing is superb. Probably the extra benefit on top of Cherki is he's a dead ball taker. So we've lost that with Douglas Luiz, somebody to come in and take a share of the deliveries. And then last but certainly not least, and a lot of people I sort of read the reports of were raving about, was his defensive work rate was just fantastic for a 10, both in high press, but also then slightly more intelligent. Uh, wait, pounce on a loose ball. So he's 2.2 tackles per 90 and a really, really high win percentage in the final third. So
Yeah.
again, comparing him to Gonçalves, Nico Williams, Sula, Baena, Chekri, and I also chucked in Takefusa Kubo and Doué from Rennes for my comparisons. He was number one for progressive distance carried, tackles won, win percentage in the final third, shot creating actions. And I would say the big downside, so to speak, is we're talking about somebody doing that in the Belgian league
Yeah.
for the best side in Belgium, more or less.
Yeah.
So it is got to be taken with a pinch of salt. But yeah, we all love that sort of player, don't we?
Yeah, completely. Do you know, he's not somebody I've heard of. So this is what I love doing these episodes with you, Adam, because last season you introduced me to one or two players I wasn't really aware of at all, like Facundo Medina and Apenda I didn't really know too much about. But Bilal El Khannouss, yeah, looking at his stats, aerials won. Wow, for as it's saying, attacking midfielder,
Yeah, he's
that's
not bad at that as
impressive.
well, actually. Yeah,
He
yeah,
wins
yeah.
a lot, good tackles, and that he has really good comparative stats with other midfielders and other attacking midfielders and wingers. So going forward, so he's a he's definitely, it sounds like a player that'll be worth watching. Somebody that at his age at 20 almost inevitably is going to draw the attentions of a few big clubs, isn't it? I think one of the more recent younger attacking players that have come out of Belgium is maybe Sharda Ketelaere. Went to
Mhm.
Milan from Club Bruges in his early 21, maybe. Really didn't work for him at Milan at all. Season there, and then went there for big money, and then went to Atalanta on loan, and it's really worked for him there. It's been, that's good evidence. Never write a player off, and players can go from those leagues as well. Never write a player off if they have one bad season, but also some of these players can make that jump from the Belgian league up to Serie A, or as we found out with Benteke once, from Belgium to the Premier
Yeah,
League.
yeah,
So
yeah. And
um,
it's rarely a smooth path as well, right? Like very few players, I guess not very few, but it is not unusual, and it's probably more likely that you'll weave your way to being a top player
hmm,
than it doesn't have to go. We're talking about my success rate on doing this. Not one I brought up on the podcast, but somebody I had on my list for ages. There's a guy called Awachiche, who was doing Checkry type numbers in the French league 2 years ago, I want to say 3 years ago. He looked like the next big thing. Looked very similar to both these guys on an FB ref type stats, and is now at Sunderland of all places.
right.
Uh, he seems to be part of their sort of revolution, but had to take steps back, and Sunderland is his next step on the ladder, I would suggest. And he had a good season last season. I don't see a Premier League team coming in for him, but sometimes these guys with exceptional creative stats in one scenario uh, find it very difficult when they move on, especially I think as probably is the case with Chekri, but less so with El Khannouss, when they're diminutive,
Mhm.
when they're kind of used to having it all their own way in a good side in a less physical league.
Yeah.
Um, it's why I think it's interesting to see. Obviously, we talked about his name's completely gone out of my head. Just joined at Everton that we talked about last year.
And I,
Iliman Ndiaye. Yeah, when we talked about Iliman Ndiaye, what was exciting about him was he was doing it for Sheffield United in the Championship, getting booted, and then continued to do it for them in the Premier League. Seemed to relish the physicality of it in a Grealish-like way. And for Awachiche to have had a good season, a really good season at Sunderland, suggests maybe he's another one to keep your eye on, but not this year, I think. Maybe next year.
okay. Yeah, it's yeah, and as I say, these players they're very young by 20. I'm amazed Rayan Cherki is 20. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. Why did he come through when he was 16, maybe? Is that why it feels like he's been around
Mhm.
so long? And I remember
Yeah.
when he came through, the hype machine around him was, this guy is going to be the Zinedine Zidane of the future. And he's obviously had a really good career. He's played at Lyon for a fair few years now, and they started the season absolutely abjectly last year, but they really came firing back, didn't they? And
Mhm.
Lacazette sort of leading the line there, and but yeah, I think Shirky's a funny one. I think it was funny before you said Hatton Ben Arthur. The thing I thought in my head thinking about him, I was like, I genuinely was thinking about it. I was like, I sort of imagine him of like 10, 11 years ago being somebody that goes to Newcastle when they were not very good, but he comes in and he's like clearly their exciting player, and all the Geordies
Yeah,
just won't shut up about him, and
yeah,
scores, every month, like in the goal of the month collection of match of the day, every other month, like
yeah,
he'll score one that will be included.
yeah.
He's an interesting one. Cherki's
Or
been
like
linked with
maybe an Adel Tarapt, sort of
yes, who is
clearly brilliant, but like never quite turns it into 90 minutes of football, if that makes sense.
yeah, completely. And Cherki's been linked with West Ham quite heavily recently, and also Borussia Dortmund.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It tells you something about a player that in the same week it's West Ham, Dortmund, Paris Saint-Germain.
yeah,
It shows you that like county departments are just not quite sure what he is and what to do with him. I think probably benefits him to have stayed a lot longer at Lyon and got a little bit more physicality about him. He's still not, don't get me wrong, he's not massive,
mm,
but I think it's time for him to move. I sort of hope it's not West Ham.
yeah. And
um,
it's an interesting league, the French one. I think it's kind of underestimated how physical it kind of is. I remember watching. I don't really watch it very often, but I remember when Messi went there, I was watching that, and I thought he definitely gets kicked more than he did in La Liga. Like it was definitely a much more,
yeah, yeah, it's super athletic. I think there's an
yeah,
awful lot of athleticism in that league. Um, yeah, I think it is still a different type of physicality to the Premier League, though. I think you'll get booted, but you'll see it coming from a long way away. Whereas in the Premier League, I think it's just he'll he'll it, the gaps tighten up a little bit quicker. I think so. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, especially at a West Ham, where that might go. Maybe he's. I guess if you're going to compare him to a West Ham player of old, sort of Payet type
yeah.
player,
I mean,
they might get something special out of him. Who knows?
yeah, he was brilliant. Yeah, I think with the number 10 at Villa, I do. I mean, with Buendia coming back, you sort of would see Buendia as a bit of a player who could be a bit of a lock picker.
I think that's
Buendia,
what we
obviously,
need.
yeah, but I wouldn't mind another one. I think Buendia can play on the left. We have Rogers there, Eileen Junior there. We have Jacob Ramsey there. I mean, God, and then Matson coming in. That left hand side next season with Pau Torres as well, and Mings coming back. Suddenly, that left hand side for
Mhm.
Villa looks like oh, pretty strong.
Mhm.
God, hope there's no
I'd obviously
injuries.
I'd be adding Facundo Medina still to that, by the way. If
Yeah,
I had my
yeah, and but then but if Buendia, if you had another number 10 of the profile of a lot picker, kind of like a Alex Baena or as you mentioned, El Khannouss at Genk, players like that who, some games you could then have, let's say a Diaby and a Bailey is that sort of a bit quicker, very, very skillful, um, fantastic movement, all that sort of stuff. But then maybe other games you can mix that up. You could have a Bailey and let's say a player of the profile of a Baena, and behind them on the left you've got Buendia, and just all the I don't know, it's just a lot of different ingredients you can use and different
Mhm.
approaches you can take. And yeah, I agree. I think I'd like to see another lock picker at Villa, and one other position I'm pretty sure we might be targeting is if John Duran goes.
Mhm.
Gonna have to get a
Yeah.
replacement for him if he does, and I think the noise is coming out from Duran himself. Just the links, it just feels a little bit like it might be for the best if he does go on.
I yes, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's amazing how quickly it becomes common knowledge and fact that he's a difficult person,
Yeah,
that he's tricky, that he's hard to deal with, etc., etc. But probably the most telling thing was the McGinn comment off the back of a very
yeah,
great day for Duran scoring those two late goals that he was just like, he's a nightmare to play with. And he
yeah,
said it tongue in cheek, but like, you're like, that's slipped out.
yeah.
So yeah, I think if anything like the money being discussed is on the table, then I think we have to take it. In terms of a replacement, haven't looked loads into strikers, but I know we've talked before about Iheanacho filling a gap.
Mhm.
A Pender's replacement at Lens, Eli Wahi, would probably say he hasn't lit it up. at Lens in the way he did the year before at Montpellier, but still very good stats. Profile wise, similar to Openda and by proxy Watkins-esque.
Mhm.
And then there's a lot of people very excited about Goodmanson at Genoa.
Yes.
Just a really, really clever supporting striker, very flexible, useful in a number of positions. Could play with and instead of Watkins, I would suggest. But think Spurs are heavily interested,
Mhm.
if rumours are to be believed. But yeah, one of those would be my Duran replacement if I had to
Goodmanson,
choose.
also from Iceland, which I think might be pound for pound the greatest footballing nation on the planet. It's absolutely extraordinary. Population of what, 300, 350,000? That is absolutely
Yeah.
amazing that they produce so many players and have teams that could make World Cups and draw with Argentina and knocking them out of Euros and things like that. So it's
Yeah. And it's something
uh,
like 10% of their population goes away to tournaments when they happen.
it's extraordinary. But yes, so yeah, I think John Duran will be a very interesting one to watch. You know, Cash as well. You know, you hear the links with him and Milan and Inter as well. Apparently, are interested. So you do start to wonder: is there potentially movement there as well? Do you think there's going to be a lot of movement in July, or do you think it will be? Do you think that the sort of the main kind of the June madness has passed, and that there might just it might be a bit of a calmer month through July? Or
Uh, it's a good question. I think we would all like, and I think managers are the same, all football clubs are the same, they would like to have their squads in place in time for the start of pre-season. It doesn't seem to, well, it seems to rarely work that way, although we've been better than most in recent years. I think, as you sort of hinted at, there's still a good chunk of movement to come. I don't think you see some people on forums and what have you saying that's PSR done. Here we go. Let's start splashing the cash. I don't see that being the case,
Mm.
but it feels like there are a few to leave, and I see them absolutely being replaced. Yes, cash. Yes, Duran. At least one left back, maybe even both.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I would suggest that I wouldn't want to leave all of that business until August.
No, no.
So I'd like to see some movement in July. And you've got the slightly complicating factor of the Olympics, right? Haven't you? Follow
Oh
straight on
yeah,
after the
yeah,
Euros.
yeah.
Martinez is still sounds like angling to go. Um, Olsen, probably we haven't mentioned on the list of somebody
Yes,
that
yeah,
if he isn't leaving, he's one that Villa fans are pushing out the door.
yeah.
And I don't see, although I think there are some in the Lions that suggest he might be, I don't see Gauchi being your 50 games of the season second choice goalkeeper.
No, not yet,
But
not yet.
purely based on he hasn't been trusted to play a single minute anyway, as far as I'm aware. So
Yeah,
it seems like he's one for the future, third choice.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, if Martinez is going to the Olympics, I want a goalkeeper soon.
Yeah, please, God. Because we've got a pretty tough start to the season. West Ham away, Arsenal at home, then Leicester away, I think it is. But yeah, Adam, it's been absolutely fantastic to chat to you. We're both part of the London Lions. How can people get involved, and why should they get involved?
If you are a Villa fan in London, it is just a great opportunity to join a community of Villa fans, really. We
Yeah.
always go and watch the games together when they're on telly. We have a group of season ticket holders who journey up together regularly. And we also have access to tickets. We get part of an allocation because we're recognised by the club itself. So it is a way, because it's obviously very, very hard to get away tickets these days. It is a way to potentially once or twice a season get your hands on a precious away ticket. And most importantly of all to us, it has a London-based football team who take on the great, the good, and the evil of European super football. I'm led to believe Real Madrid are joining next season, and
Yeah,
I find it very hard to believe they're not going to be very good.
yeah.
So yeah, we're big on the recruitment drive. All comers are welcome. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, AVFC London Lions. Drop us a message through any of those, and please do get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Can strongly recommend it. I absolutely love being involved with the Lions. It's sort of transformed my living in London, to be honest. It's been fantastic. But Adam, thanks so much for coming on. Absolutely love doing these shows with you. And I'll aim to do a few more as well this summer. Just trying, it's always just fun talking about players and theorizing who might be good and not, and then seeing how their careers develop, really. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, Adam.
No worries, mate. Really enjoyed it. Cheers.